My name is Elizabeth Bellamy. I'm 25 years old, and the worst morning of my life started before the sun came up. I opened my eyes a little after 5 and knew there was no chance I was falling back asleep. In just a few hours, I would be sitting across from the admissions committee at Yale School of Medicine. I had spent the last 3 years working toward that single interview, and everything I had sacrificed came down to one day. I wasn't born into money. Nobody opened doors for me. I spent nights studying while my friends were out enjoying college. I volunteered at a free clinic whenever I had time. When I needed to retake the MCAT, I paid for it myself by picking up extra shifts at a small diner. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. On the back of my bedroom door hung the only blazer I owned. Dark gray, simple, professional. I had found it at a thrift store almost a year earlier. It wasn't expensive, but to me it felt priceless. I had it dry cleaned the week before my interview and checked it so many times that I could have put it on with my eyes closed. That blazer wasn't just clothing. It was proof that I was finally getting my chance. My younger sister, Vanessa, had never liked seeing me succeed. Whenever I earned a scholarship, she rolled her eyes. Whenever I got accepted into another program, she found a way to ruin the moment. If someone complimented me, she always had something sarcastic to say before the conversation ended. Eventually, I stopped expecting support from her. Keeping my distance seemed easier than arguing. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. After breakfast, I walked back into my room and immediately noticed a strange smell. Strong, sharp, like chemicals. I looked toward the closet door. My blazer was still hanging exactly where I had left it. At first, everything looked normal. Then I picked it up. The left shoulder was covered in pale stains. The lapel was discolored. The front was ruined. Bleach, not a splash, not an accident. Someone had deliberately poured bleach over the only thing I planned to wear to the biggest interview of my life. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. I kept turning the blazer over, hoping I was seeing it wrong. I wasn't. My hands started shaking as I carried it downstairs. Vanessa was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal like it was any other morning. My mom stood at the counter making coffee. I held up the blazer. "Did you do this?" Vanessa barely looked at it. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I turned to my mom. I expected surprise, anger, anything. Instead, she sighed. "Elizabeth, stop making such a big deal out of everything. It's just a jacket." Just a jacket. Those 3 words hurt more than the bleach. Before I could answer, my dad walked into the kitchen. He looked at me, then at my blazer. "You've got an important interview today," he said. "Don't start a fight." That was it. Nobody asked who ruined it. Nobody cared that someone had destroyed the only professional outfit I owned. Apparently, the real problem wasn't what had happened. The problem was that I was talking about it. I walked back upstairs without saying another word, closed my bedroom door, sat on the edge of my bed, and let myself cry. Not for an hour, not all morning, just long enough to get it out of my system. When I finally looked at the clock, I realized something. I had 2 choices: stay home or walk into Yale wearing a blazer someone had tried very hard to destroy. Quitting had never been part of my plan, so I grabbed the iron, tried everything I could think of, and watched the stains stay exactly where they were. The damage wasn't coming out, neither was I. I buttoned the blazer, looked at myself in the mirror, and took one last deep breath. If someone wanted this jacket to stop me, they were about to be very disappointed. The drive to New Haven took a little over 2 hours, but I barely noticed the road. My mind kept going back to the kitchen, my mom calling it just a jacket. My dad telling me not to make a scene. Vanessa pretending she had no idea what happened. The more I replayed it, the calmer I became. Not because I had forgiven them, because I realized something. Nobody was coming to save me. If I wanted this future, I had to walk toward it by myself, just like I always had. By the time I pulled into the visitor parking lot at Yale, my hands had finally stopped shaking. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. The bleach stains were impossible to miss. Anyone standing a few feet away would notice them immediately. For a second, I almost took the blazer off. Maybe walking in with just my white blouse would look better. Maybe nobody would ask questions. But I knew that wasn't true. Without the blazer, I'd spend the entire interview thinking about it. So I put it back on, straightened the collar, grabbed my folder, and walked inside. The admissions building was exactly what I expected. Quiet, professional, beautiful, Everything looked expensive. Everything felt important. The waiting room already had several applicants sitting in perfect silence. Every single one of them looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. Perfect suits, designer shoes, leather briefcases, confident smiles. For a moment, I felt completely out of place. Then I reminded myself why I was there. They weren't interviewing my blazer. They were interviewing me. I signed in, took a seat, and waited. A few people glanced at my jacket. One woman looked away quickly after noticing the stains. Another applicant stared for a second longer before pretending he hadn't. Nobody said anything. The silence was almost worse. About 20 minutes later, the receptionist smiled. "Elizabeth Bellamy?" I stood up. Every step toward the interview room felt heavier than the last. I knocked gently. A voice answered, "Come in." Behind the desk sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and glasses. He looked down at the file in front of him before looking up at me. His eyes immediately landed on my blazer. Just for a second. Then they moved back to my face. Something in his expression changed. He wasn't judging me. He looked surprised. He glanced down at my application again, then back at me. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Wait," he said quietly. "You're Elizabeth Bellamy?" "Yes, sir." For another few seconds, he simply looked at me. Then a small smile appeared on his face. "I knew your name sounded familiar." That wasn't the reaction I expected. He reached into a folder beside his desk and pulled out another document. He placed it next to my application. "I've seen your name before." I looked down. It was a copy of the letter I'd received months earlier after winning a national undergraduate research award. I couldn't believe it. "You remember that?" He nodded. "I was part of the review committee." For a second, I forgot all about the blazer. He remembered my research. Out of thousands of students, out of hundreds of submissions, he remembered mine. "I argued that your paper deserved to win," he said. "A lot of people wanted something safer, something more predictable." He tapped the paper with one finger. "But yours felt different." I didn't know what to say. "It didn't sound like someone writing from a textbook," he continued. "It sounded like someone who had actually lived through the problem." I smiled. Because I had. I told him about growing up in a rural community where finding a doctor wasn't simple, where people sometimes waited weeks for appointments, where small medical problems became emergencies because help wasn't close. He listened without interrupting, not once. Then he closed the folder. "I've been doing admissions for a long time," he said, "and I was hoping I'd get the chance to meet you one day." I felt every ounce of fear disappear. For the first time that day, I wasn't thinking about the bleach stains anymore. I was simply having a conversation with someone who cared about who I was, not what I was wearing. And I had no idea that the most unexpected moment of the interview was still ahead. The interview was scheduled for 30 minutes. It lasted almost an hour. The questions weren't designed to trap me. They were designed to understand me. Why medicine? Why not research full-time? What made me choose service over a higher-paying career? Every answer came naturally. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I was simply telling the truth. I talked about the free clinic where I volunteered, about working double shifts at the diner to pay for my MCAT, about watching people delay medical care because they couldn't afford it. For the first time all day, I forgot I was in one of the most important interviews of my life. It felt like a real conversation. About halfway through, Dr. Whitfield glanced toward my blazer again. He didn't avoid the subject. He simply asked, "Can I ask what happened?" For a moment, I considered making up a story. Maybe I spilled something. Maybe it happened at the dry cleaner. That would have been easier. Instead, I decided that if I was going to leave this room, I would leave without pretending. "My sister poured bleach on it this morning." The room went completely quiet. "I only own one blazer," I continued. "I could either cancel the interview or wear it anyway." He looked at me for several seconds, not with pity, with respect. "You still came." "I worked too hard not to." He slowly nodded and wrote something in his notebook. I couldn't see what he wrote. I didn't ask. A few minutes later, the interview ended. Dr. Whitfield stood up and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Elizabeth," he said, "thank you for coming today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity." As I reached the door, he spoke one more time. "One piece of advice." I turned around. "Never let someone else's bitterness convince you to shrink your dreams." Those words stayed with me the entire drive home. When I walked through the front door that evening, nobody asked how the interview had gone. My mom was watching television, my dad was reading the newspaper. Vanessa was scrolling through her phone. It was as if the biggest day of my life had never happened. I quietly went upstairs. Days turned into weeks. Every time the mail truck stopped in front of our house, my heart started racing. Nothing. Then another day passed. Nothing. I tried not to think about it, but it was impossible. Every morning I wondered if I had said enough. Every night I replayed every answer in my head. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I wasn't confident enough. Maybe the blazer really had hurt my chances after all. Then, 6 weeks later, I opened the mailbox and saw a large envelope with the Yale logo in the corner. My heart nearly stopped. I didn't open it outside. I carried it into the house with both hands. No one noticed. I sat down at the kitchen table, took one deep breath, and opened it. The first sentence changed my life forever. Congratulations. I read it again, then again. I had been accepted. Not only accepted, I had also been awarded a full merit scholarship. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything around me. 3 years of sacrifice, thousands of hours, every late night shift, every exam, every rejection, every moment of self-doubt, it had all been worth it. My mother walked into the kitchen. She saw the letter in my hands. "What is it?" Without saying a word, I slid it across the table. She read the first page, then the second. A smile slowly appeared on her face. "I always knew you could do it." I looked at her calmly. "No, you didn't." She froze. I wasn't angry. I wasn't raising my voice. I was simply telling the truth. "You told me it was just a jacket." She lowered her eyes. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. A few minutes later, my dad came into the kitchen. My mom quietly handed him the acceptance letter. He adjusted his glasses and read every page without saying a word. When he finished, he looked up at me. "I'm proud of you." Then he reached out and shook my hand. That was all. No hug, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened the morning of my interview. Just a handshake. Years earlier, that would have broken my heart. This time it didn't. I accepted it for exactly what it was. Nothing more, nothing less. Vanessa eventually walked in. She immediately noticed the envelope with the Yale logo sitting on the table. She picked it up without asking. Her eyes moved across the page. The smile disappeared from her face almost instantly. "So, you got in?" "I did." "Full scholarship?" "Yes." She folded the letter and placed it back on the table. "Oh." That was her entire response. No congratulations, no apology, nothing about the blazer, nothing about the bleach, nothing. She walked away like the conversation had never happened. Strangely enough, I wasn't disappointed. I realized I had been waiting years for an apology that was never coming. And I didn't need it anymore. Because my future no longer depended on whether the people in that house believed in me. A month later, I packed everything I owned into my old car and drove to New Haven. My apartment was tiny. The bedroom barely fit a bed. The kitchen was smaller than the one back home. But when I closed the front door that first night, it felt bigger than any house I'd ever lived in, because it was mine. No one could tear me down there. No one could tell me my dreams were too big. Classes started a few weeks later. Medical school was harder than anything I'd ever experienced. Some days I questioned whether I belonged there. Some exams felt impossible. Some clinical rotations left me completely exhausted. Whenever I started doubting myself, I opened my closet. That blazer was still hanging there. The bleach stains hadn't faded. The fabric was still ruined. Most people would have thrown it away. I couldn't. Every stain reminded me of a simple truth. Someone had tried to stop me at the exact moment my future was about to begin. They failed. Not because I was fearless, not because I was stronger than everyone else, because I refused to quit. That ruined blazer became the most valuable thing I owned. Not because it looked good, because it reminded me of who I became after someone tried to take everything from me. Years have passed since that interview. People often ask me what helped me get into Yale. Some expect me to talk about grades. Others think I'll mention my research or my volunteer work. Those things mattered. But they aren't the first thing that comes to mind. I remember walking into that building wearing something I was embarrassed to wear. I remember believing everyone would judge me. Instead, I learned something I'll never forget. The right people don't judge your scars. They pay attention to your character. Looking back now, I almost feel grateful that I didn't have another blazer. If I had, I probably would have worn it. Dr. Whitfield might never have asked what happened. We might never have had the conversation that changed everything. Life has a strange way of turning painful moments into unexpected opportunities. Not always, but sometimes. If you're going through something difficult today, don't assume it's the end of your story. The people trying to hold you back don't get to decide where your life ends. You do. And sometimes the very thing they hoped would destroy your confidence becomes the reason people remember your strength. That old gray blazer still hangs in my closet. I don't wear it anymore. I don't need to. It already carried me through the hardest door I ever had to walk through. And every time I see those faded bleach stains, I smile. Because they remind me that my future was never decided by the people who tried to break me. It was decided the moment I chose to keep walking anyway. People sometimes ask me if I ever repaired my relationship with my family. The honest answer is, not really. Life moved on. I moved to New Haven. Medical school became my entire world. The late-night study sessions came back. So did the long hours. The stress never disappeared. But this time, every difficult day brought me closer to the life I had dreamed about for years. I called my parents on birthdays and holidays. Sometimes my mom asked how classes were going. Sometimes my dad asked if I was getting enough sleep. Our conversations stayed polite, short, comfortable enough. But something had changed forever. Trust doesn't disappear in one day. It disappears after years of choosing silence when someone needs you most. As for Vanessa, we rarely spoke. Not because we argued, because there was simply nothing left to say. One afternoon, almost a year after I started medical school, I went home for Thanksgiving. Everything looked exactly the same. The same house, the same kitchen, the same family photos on the wall. Only I felt different. While my mom was cooking dinner, Vanessa walked into the living room. For the first time in years, we were alone. She looked at me for a few seconds before speaking. "I heard you're doing really well. I like it there." She nodded. Then she quietly asked, "You still have that blazer?" I looked at her. "Yes." She gave a small, nervous laugh. "I can't believe you kept it." "I can." She looked down at the floor. "I was angry back then." I waited. "I didn't think you'd actually go." Another pause. "I thought you'd cancel." There it was. Not a real apology, not "I'm sorry," just the truth. She had wanted me to give up. She had believed destroying one piece of clothing would destroy years of work. She underestimated me. "I almost stayed home," I admitted, "but only for a few minutes." She slowly nodded. "I know." That conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no big family moment, no movie ending where everyone suddenly became close. Real life doesn't usually work that way. Sometimes people never become the family you hoped they'd be. Sometimes the only closure you receive is realizing you don't need their approval anymore. When I drove back to New Haven that weekend, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because Vanessa apologized, she really hadn't. I felt lighter because I finally understood something. Forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding a relationship. Sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to carry someone else's bitterness into your future. Today, that old gray blazer is still hanging in my closet. Every now and then, a friend asks why I haven't thrown it away. I always smile. Because they only see damaged fabric. I see proof. Proof that one bad morning didn't decide my future. Proof that someone else's jealousy couldn't erase years of hard work. Proof that the strongest part of a person isn't what they wear. It's the decision they make after life gives them every reason to quit. If you've ever had someone laugh at your goals, if you've ever been told your dreams were too big, if someone close to you tried to make you feel small, remember this. People can ruin your clothes. They can damage your confidence. They can even try to convince you that you're not good enough. But they cannot decide how your story ends. Only you can do that. And looking back now, I don't remember the bleach. I don't remember the embarrassment. I don't even remember how nervous I felt walking into that interview. I remember opening that acceptance letter. I remember earning my place. And I remember the lesson that changed my life forever. The people who try the hardest to block your path often become nothing more than a chapter in a story they could never stop. The ending was always going to belong to me. And if my story reminds even one person to keep going when everything seems to be falling apart, then every single step of that journey was worth it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more true-to-life stories about resilience, determination, and unexpected victories waiting for you in the next video.